And okay, so let's talk editing. I've got all kinds of questions for you, and we'll get in as many as we can.
All right.
But let's start with the sample, and then let's move on to a full manuscript. So just that sample, because I want to nail it. I want to get that representation.
Mm-hmm.
What are the common mistakes you see authors making in the sample? How would you go about editing it and making it bulletproof?
So like a first chapter, or like usually I guess it's like 5 to 10 pages that agents ask for in those initial samples. So a first line, at least for me, goes a very long way. Just something that's really eye-catching and different and makes me like kind of sit up straighter and be like, oh, I want to read this. By the end of the first chapter, there should be a clear sense of who the main character is and what type of story this is. And that seems obvious, but you'd be surprised at how often that does not happen.
Tragic. I've read so many terrible queries.
Yeah, and you just, and I think much like the query itself, authors sort of overthink it sometimes because they want to pack in all of this information at once. Sometimes less is more in chapter 1. I try to tell writers, pretend backstory isn't even a thing in chapter 1, and then slowly reveal whatever needs to be revealed later. But chapter 1 should really focus on, this is where we are, this is where your story begins. I know agents and editors will say like begin with the action, and writers take that very literally sometimes. But usually it just means like, what's the first thing we need to see your main character do? And other than dialogue and inner monologue, what are they physically doing on the page, and how does that begin their story? A lot of times, and I'm sure you've seen them too, the beginnings that start with waking up or getting ready for the day, eating breakfast. If it's kidlit, sometimes it's today is the first day of school, or today is the last day of school because it is a summer story. I don't need that exact moment of the beginning of whatever it is. I need when the story begins, not necessarily when that person's day begins. And learning the difference, I think, is a strong revision tool to have in your back pocket when going back to your first chapter after you finish the book. Reread your first chapter and think like, is this really the beginning? Like, but by the time you get to the end of the book and you know exactly what the story is, where it ends, what happens along the way, if that first chapter is just falling flat in your own mind about like, okay, this story really could have began on chapter 3. This was like all just throat clearing before that. That's how you know if it's a strong story. Like, can you just remove chapter 1 completely and the story reads exactly the same? Then remove chapter 1 completely.
But it's my favorite lines in it.
Harsh but fair, sorry.
Merciless. And then let's see. So when you get past that initial opening and you've got a good hook, and do you like a gimmicky opening? What constitutes a good opening?
It depends on. I feel like that's like my refrain of this interview is like, it depends. But
no, I want you to give specific answers that apply to every manuscript and every situation.
But it truly does depend on the type, like what is your genre, what type of story are you writing? There will be different reader expectations based on genre and what the readers want. A good opening for me is just like, do I know where I am? Like, what is a setting established? Is a genre established? Is a character established? And that's basically all I want. I don't know if that answers your question.
No, it does. Makes sense.
Okay.
Do you want, unfortunately, I didn't know where the anecdote was to the poison I just drank, that kind of thing? Or is that more gimmicky and not worthwhile?
I'm very anti-gimmick, personally. But I do think those kind of things work well in like commercial middle grade, because those readers don't have a lot of experience with stories yet. A lot of them just graduated out of chapter books. So it's not gimmicky to them. And that's, part of being an agent and an editor is knowing like, I'm not the audience for a middle grade. I just need to know what good storytelling is for that market. So those types of openings work really well in those for that readership because it's all new to them. It's not a gimmick.